Louis Gregory's interest in the Baha'i Faith began in 1907. After becoming a Baha'i in 1909, he corresponded with Abdu'l-Baha. The master wrote to him that he had high expectations for him in the field of race relations. Not long thereafter, Louis Gregory ceased working as a lawyer and focused his attention on writing, traveling and lecturing on the topic of racial unity. After Abdu'l-Baha's imprisonment ended, he resided for a time in Egypt. Once there, he invited Louis Gregory to spend time with him in Egypt and also to go on pilgrimage to the Holy Lands. Mr. Gregory sailed from New York on March 25, 1910, and 17 days later arrived in Egypt on April 11. Abdu'l-Baha recognized Louis Gregory's unique abilities, talents, and spiritual capacity and treated him as a beloved and trusted son. In his own words, the master said of Louis Gregory, that pure soul has a heart like unto transparent water. He is like unto pure gold. That is why he is acceptable in any market, and is current in every country. Imagine, in 1910 this son of two former slaves traveled by ship and set foot on the African continent, as a free man. His trip was a testament to how far he and his country had come. At that time, few Americans who weren't born to wealth could undertake such an extended voyage, yet this young African-American bachelor did all that. Also noteworthy, during his first meeting with the master, he also met his future wife, Miss Louise Matthew of England. In her biography of Louis Gregory titled To Move the World, author Gail Morrison noted the significance of his trip this way. The importance to Louis Gregory of his first overseas voyage cannot be exaggerated. Even as a pleasure trip, it would have been a milestone in his life. He crossed in freedom the ocean that his forebears had traversed in chains. Moreover, he landed on the African continent with a new ethnic awareness. Having been recognized as an American on sight by fellow passengers from other countries, he concluded that blacks had made a unique adaptation to America precisely because their ties with Africa had been so ruthlessly cut, and in fact no other American group is more American. This realization, coupled with a vision of the future development of a cosmopolitan world order, pervaded his racial amity work in the years ahead. It helped him maintain his perspective and confidence during the discouraging years when a world war supposedly fought for democracy was followed in the United States by racial conflict, by the revival of the white supremacist Ku Klux Klan, and by the rise of Marcus Garvey's black separatist Back to Africa movement. After his voyage, Mr. Gregory never doubted that blacks belonged in America, and that their rightful presence and full integration in every aspect of society would eventually be recognized even by extremists of both races. From To Move the World, by Gail Morrison, page 43. The following abridged version of the book A Heavenly Vista does not contain the opening introduction to the Baha'i Faith, skips a few sections and a few lists of names. Please check the description box for a link to the full online print version. To give listeners a feel for the time, some historic footage has been included. Links to the original's films are included in the description box. Now, from the book A Heavenly Vista. The Pilgrimage of Louis G. Gregory. A pilgrimage. On the afternoon of April 10, 1911, the writer landed at Alexandria, Egypt. As soon as possible my way was made to the store of Mirza Hassan Krasani, where I met several of the friends who received me with marks of kindness and soon put me at ease. A letter of introduction, written by Dr. E.C. Getzinger and transcribed in Persian, was handed to Muhammad Yazdi, an Oriental gentleman of pleasing manners and placid countenance. "You want to see our Lord?" he half questioned, half asserted. Upon giving my assent, he agreed to act as guide. Although pleased at this mark of courtesy, I reasoned that it was unnecessary, and that I had no wish to take him away from his business. But he put my objections aside, saying, "This is spiritual business." Thus, escorted by my gracious friend, I went first to my hotel, and soon thence to a modest but comfortable appearing house with a front garden, the temporary home of Abdu'l-Baha. Passing through the garden, I was left standing at a side entrance leading to the second story by a flight of steps. After an absence of a few moments, my guide returned, indicating that I should follow. I soon entered a reception room on the second floor. Several persons were present, including the future Mrs. Louis Gregory, but among them Abdu'l-Baha was easily distinguished. Majesty and beauty are his adornments. Following a natural impulse, my knee was bent reverently before him. Feeling him bend over me, I knew that he touched my head with his lips. He then raised me up and directed me to a seat. Abdu'l-Baha asked after my health. I answered that I was well. For the weariness of the long journey, the suspense, and the excitement of landing for the first time at an Oriental port, were all forgotten in his presence. I never felt more peaceful or composed. I said that I was happy to attain the meeting. He answered, "I am happy to have you here." Mention was then made of fragrant Baha'i meetings in Washington and New York just prior to my departure, and of letters and tokens of love sent by the friends. Some of the messages being delivered, out of his great wisdom fitting responses were made. The race question. Abdu'l-Baha asked, "What of the conflict between the white and colored races?" This question made me smile, for I at once felt that my inquirer, although he had never in person visited America, yet knew more of conditions than I could ever know. I answered that there was much friction between the races. That those who accepted the Baha'i teachings had hopes of an amicable settlement of racial differences, while others were despondent. Among the friends were earnest souls who wished for a closer unity of races and hoped that he might point out the way to them. He further questioned, "Does this refer to the removal of hatreds and antagonisms on the part of one race, or of both races?" "Both races," was my answer, and he said this would be done. Here he was told of a suggestion that had been made, that the central Baha'i meeting in Washington should be open to all races, while group meetings might be organized along racial lines. The Reconstruction-era house of worship, must be open to all races. "But at present we have no Reconstruction-era," I answered. "There must be no distinctions in Baha'i meetings. All are equal." Abdu'l-Baha expressed approval of the working committee in giving representation to the colored race. He said he would pray for them. What should the colored race do to improve its material and spiritual condition? The best thing for it is to accept these teachings. In this way they will gain the confidence of the whites and differences will fade. The Baha'i teachings reveal the means of both material and spiritual progress. Pleasure was expressed at seeing Abdu'l-Baha look so well. He replied that he felt well. "I am glad that you overlook my shortcomings and receive me so cordially." His beautiful face became illumined by a smile and he answered, "You are welcome, very welcome. I have waited for your coming and, indicating Mr. Meekin, have a special guide to take you around." He inquired about the amount of time I could stay and said that I might divide it between Ramleh and Akka. Then he added, "And now I want you to see two other friends of mine, one of them a minister of state." Upon shaking hands, my first interview with the center of God's covenant was at an end. We had talked long, and twice I paused to ask if I were not consuming too much of his time. Each time he said no, and the tenderest parent could not have been so patient, courteous and loving. This evening I dined with K.M. Makam of Tehran, formerly a minister of state. He embraced the Baha'i cause against the intense opposition of his proud family, risking place and fortune. He was deeply interested in the progress of the cause in America and was especially happy over reports of unity. Noruddin Zain was present and interpreted. April 11th. This morning at my hotel, the Victoria, I awaited Mr. Meekin and Mr. Malk, with whom I had a tentative appointment. In the meantime I was busy with my diary. At the sound of voices and footsteps, I looked out of the window and saw Abdu'l-Baha coming up the steps leading to the broad veranda. He was accompanied by a tall, Arab-like Persian. Surprised, I went joyfully to meet him. He took my hand and said, "I came especially to see you." He then led me to a seat and left me. Not knowing how long he would be absent, as I heard him going along the corridor and saying in a strong voice, "Good morning," I resumed my writing at the table. He soon returned, and again led me to a seat against the wall of the room. This time he was accompanied by Tablets and the other Persian. We were all seated, and a few words were said by Abdu'l-Baha. Then he left us, explaining that he would visit a sick friend. Then the tall Persian, who proved to be Mirza Hassan Krasani, embraced me very warmly in Oriental fashion. He explained that he did not sooner address me because of the holy presence. Thus the knowing ones in many ways show their reverence for Abdu'l-Baha. The Persians whom I met were all silent before him, unless bidden to speak. Yet he so often responds to silent thoughts. After a short time Abdu'l-Baha sent for me. He was seated in the bay window of a room on the 3rd floor. We were joined by his secretaries, to one of whom he dictated tablets. After a time, his permission was obtained to present letters and tokens sent by the friends in America. The tokens consisted of a number of articles of small value. As each was presented, he examined it with a pleased expression. My own happiness was great, springing from the knowledge that although they were simple and inexpensive, they represented much love on the part of the friends. When the last of these, a bottle of perfume, was presented, he opened it, rubbing a little of it upon his beard and upon the hands of his secretaries. On this occasion, he also sent messages and greetings to the friends, responsive to theirs. Every action on Abdu'l-Baha's part was an indication of how full of love, joy and peace is this mighty educator of humanity.